welcome back to the STR Intel Podcast. Today we're going to be talking about Bill SB33, the Colorado Tax Lodging Bill. And we talked about this before on the previous podcast, so if you haven't seen that, go back, take a look at that. It's episode 34. I believe it's labeled SB33. So we go into great detail on the bill and outline it a lot more. This one, we're going to be talking about the bill, but we're going to be basically talking about the Capitol hearing, the reading of the bill, and what was the final outcome for the bill. And Craig spent some great deal of time at the Capitol, was there pretty late last week. So we'll be going in that, outlining that. But yeah, how's it going, Craig?
It's going well. Cannot complain. It's a beautiful sunny day up here in Florissant.
Yeah, the weather has improved. We had snow, was it 2 days ago?
Yeah, yep.
And now it's 60, 70 degrees again. So
welcome to Colorado.
Actual spring weather, but we'll probably get another snow mid-May, I'm sure.
Always don't put away your plows yet.
Right.
So.
Yeah. But for those of you that didn't see the last episode, we can talk about the bill a little bit, kind of outline it just a little bit, but we're not going to go into great detail. Talk more about kind of the actual impact of the bill. But so SB33, Colorado Lodging Tax Bill, was a proposed tax bill for all STR short-term rental owners. A 27.9% tax increase was kind of one of the big items, but
yeah, well, I think it's important to note there too where those taxes would have fell, because you hear a tax increase, like, my head oftentimes goes to the income or sales tax, all those items. Whereas this one, it was unique in the fact that it would have went on your property value. So that would have been baked into the cake on your monthly payment if you had a mortgage. But regardless of which, that would have been a monthly expense, not, fluctuant per income, or taking in consideration if you had a maintenance issue at your home and it was down for a month, so on and so forth. So, I could go all day on that. But, that's just an important thing to know.
You did an analysis if this bill were to pass on your own property. Do you want to talk about kind of that?
So my own property, the valuation of it when I purchased it was about $350, and my payment on that one would have went up about like $700 per month, and my other STR would have went up monthly about $800, which would impact my bottom line significantly, impact improvements, plans I've had for the home, which ultimately, full circle impacts the guest experience, because you're not able to bring that same product to the table because of, budget constraints and new expenditures. So it would have been very hard for me to, keep status quo on how things were going with improvements and plans.
Yeah. Would it have been affordable for you to keep managing it the same way?
No. It would have. The easy answer that everyone in the pro position would say is just pass it on to the guest. Well, you can only do that so much, because, as we'll go into too, there's already so much baked into the cake when it comes to what's already passed on to the guest. So, I wouldn't be able to manage it the same. I'd have to look at different models, otherwise severely dilute what I was bringing to the table.
Right. Yeah, definitely. So yeah, last week you went to the Capitol hearing in Denver, and was it like 2:00 you were supposed to be there?
Yep. Oh yeah. Well, and I got there at 2:00, and the nature of I-25, if anyone's ever had the pleasure, plan ahead. I got there right at 2:00. I was rushing. I was, thought I'd be late. Lo and behold, I was, actually ahead about 5 hours, because the bill got pushed back hour after hour. And I don't know, it was my first ever experience at, on Capitol Hill doing a testimony, which was good, but, just a lot of hurry up and wait. So, got there at 2 p.m. and then, just basically, talking to people outside the chamber, so on and so forth. There was no coordinated, hey, this is what's going to happen. We're pushed back. We got an email at 2:05 saying the room changed, and then there's an email system that was going up but wasn't really reliable. So it was just a lot of talking to people as you bumped into them, and getting the best information that you could. But yeah, it kept getting pushed back. It was 2:00, then it was 4:30, then it was 5:30, and then ultimately ended up going into the old Senate chambers around 6:30. And there was what I think is very interesting, a great thing. There's about 150 people scheduled to testify against this bill. Well, I can't say with certainty all of them were against,
Right.
but there's 150 people scheduled to speak. And, that's a huge number. Now, we didn't get to this specific bill until about, I'd say 7 something, because there's other items ahead of this, even once we started.
Right.
So as you can imagine, a lot of those people did have to drop off because of, life, I'm sure, family, kids, jobs, obligations. So, a lot of people did, unfortunately, not get to speak. But I was in there for the long haul. I changed my mailing address to the Capitol, and I was ready to stay until the bill was presented. So it was worth the wait, and can dig into how all that went. So yeah, I mean,
Yeah. What was the support like, I guess, against the bill there?
yeah. So I mean, they did it in a way where, there's the Senate Finance Committee where, sitting down there all in front of us. And then there's a table that you go up to, 4 people fit at the table, and that's one panel. So they're doing a panel of pro, then a panel of opposition. Now, in this case, it was clearly kind of offset. There's so much more in opposition, which is a great side to be on in these cases. So they were rotating it, as they could. So the pro went first, the pro bill. And that was, there's a couple county commissioners. There was, I think the most, where I tweaked my testimony was there was a firefighter chief, which, I have the utmost respect for people for, in the first responders, industry. They do a lot of selfless work. Mm-hmm. So, nothing against, said gentleman, but, I did have some facts that offset, the things that he stated that I wanted to point out. But, so the pro point was, a lot of fairness and a talk, and then, strain on public services and safety, which, the strain on public services and safety, I jumped into that, or I'll jump into that first, and I embedded that in my testimony. Whereas, that is a concern. That is something that we should all be aware of, and, making sure that our rentals are safe. That's how this industry will survive. And there should be some basic, protocols, parameters on that. And, I was, able to say confidently that, we do take those measures into serious consideration when we're onboarding a home, working with a new homeowner. We don't allow any wood burning flames in the house outside the home. And we are all short-term rental safety certified. So we sound like OSHA employees when we're walking through our rentals and, trying to be proactive on any items to mitigate liability. And, like with certain homes, that, specific county, they might have some issues. They might have a couple problematic homes. It might be some city guidelines or county guidelines that need to be adjusted, but not, treating that root cause isn't going to do anything. If you beef up the firefighter staff, but, people still are burning down houses because there's no regulation on controlled flames in their rentals or whatever it may be, that's not going to do any favors. So that was, like a commonality for the pro. And then the strain on public services where, it's whether the home, like one example brought forth was, fire extinguishers or smoke detectors, carbon not being upkept regularly, where that's an easy thing that we implement in all of our inspections. Mm-hmm. And then, like the calls to 911 or fire departments, like I was saying, I have not seen, nor did they have any data to present, to substantiate
the question
that.
I was going to ask you is that they did any impact surveys?
Now, there's one, but it was 11% increase over the year. And they couldn't tie it directly to short-term rental. So there's no robust survey or impact survey. And I'm glad you brought that up, the impact survey, because that was one of the proposed amendments. So less than 24 hours before this bill that's been on the docket for 6 months, they dropped some amendments, which was a little, inconvenient for everybody to, read
amended that's bill. What they kept telling us is, hey, they're going to do some amendments and propose some major changes to this. But it was over the course of several months.
Exactly.
Didn't really hear what those were going to be.
The last hour, metaphorically, they were dropped. Where I was at the Capitol, I was, by the time I got them, we're driving there, and I was just going off the bullet points that were presented from, Clara or VRBO. So my knowledge on it was scanty at best, but one of the key amendments was a impact survey that would look at the impact of short-term rentals in our state, what they did. Now, it was left very open-ended and it needed funding. So, from my interpretation and how the bill was read and, what was discussed at the hearing is the state would provide about $25,000 for this impact survey, and the total cost would be about $250K. So one would beg the question, who's going to fund this? There is no good answer for that. Mm-hmm. And, who would fund an operation like this? Somebody who had a heavy interest in it. And who is the government who presented this bill going to go to for that? It's probably not going to be somebody on the pro side. So, it was very hard to, trust that it would be an unbiased thing. That was stated time and time again, but if you're, forking out hundreds of thousands of dollars, you have a vested interest in this, is my guess. You're not just going to do that to donate it to a charity. You'd go to, St. Jude for that, right?
Yeah.
So it was very open-ended on where that funding would come from. And, the fact that it would, I think it would be biased however you did it. Yeah. If somebody's putting money in it, like I said, there's a vested interest. And it was, when you hear impact survey, your head, at least mine does, goes to the negative impact, right? So it's not, looking at economic impact for the positive, the jobs, the, growth in tourism, the, livelihoods of all the people involved in the industry. So it's not encompassing that to, my reading of the bill either. So it's very one-sided, however you look at it. So that amendment, was one of the key ones. And to me, that just put it on ice, whereas they would have some one-sided biased material to, substantiate what they wanted to do the next time this tax bill came up. So, yeah, it was interesting to say the least on the tactic there.
Because I know even Colorado Springs did an impact survey on public service use when they were looking at putting the ordinance in place. And I'm pretty sure most places, even like Breckenridge and a lot of these other big cities that have short-term rental regulations, did those surveys. So it's almost like the work has already been done. They're just not communicating with local municipalities.
Well, and that was one of the commonalities too with the opposition. Like, this should be left up to the local municipalities. Because Pueblo is going to be different than Colorado Springs to Breckenridge. We have such a diverse landscape of communities in Colorado where you can't do a one-size-fits-all really anything. So
you need a nuanced tax policy for that. And if the local cities are already collecting taxes, they already have regulations, including safety regulations. That's part of the permitting process, even in Colorado Springs, is every year you have to fill out that safety checklist and ensure you have those items like the fire extinguisher, carbon monoxide detector in the home.
Well, and I know some counties and municipalities actually require a boots on the ground, like, person from the city to walk through and sign off on it. Yeah. Cool. That's awesome. And let that county do it. And I know, Breckenridge, for example, I just heard of something, and I'm, don't quote me on this, but it's something where Breckenridge is now allowing 36 bookings per year. That's something they want to do, right? But it's also, they realize it is vital for their economy. Vail Resorts, Copper Resorts, there's a couple big name resorts that are in opposition to this because they understand it's so vital to that mountain community in the mud season, in the ski season.
Right.
And then, intertwined with that is the policies that work best for that community. We filmed today's podcast here at Mountain Oasis in Florissant. It's a beautiful 3-bedroom, 2-bath home. It was just built in 2023, so sound construction, high-end finishes. It's got a private hot tub, a beautiful deck with a grill, and just, all-around family fun. Feels like you're in the middle of nowhere, but close to everything at the same time. So if you're interested, check it out. The direct booking link will actually be in the description below. Thank you.
Okay, so you ended up staying there for 5-6 hours.
Well, this whole thing ended up being 9 hours.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So yeah, fortunately, shout out to Airbnb. Their representatives bought us pizza, so
Nice.
had some fuel. But yeah, 9 hours total, because there's 150 people, like I said, scheduled to sign up. And right when we started the topic of SB33, they put a cap of 3 hours. We were not going past 3 hours of hearing people speak, which sounds like a long time, right? But we did not get through everybody. There's a handful of people that stuck it out to the end, and fortunately, everybody in person that stayed there got to speak, got to do their 2 minutes. And man, I can tell you, like, the 2 minutes goes so fast. I think I even called you and went through it, and you're like, oh yeah, that's good on timing. I ran over, like, then they get the timer that starts beeping, and like, okay, got to end this. But the 2 minutes goes fast, and quickly ran out of panels for the pro, which in the case of this too, it's very, like I said, it's very in our favor, because the Senate members of the Finance Committee, they're hearing all the opposition for, I don't know, 25 rounds after like any pro one. So that's going to be the last thing they hear too before they have to take a vote on it. And I'm not saying that's solely why, but a little kind of
I mean, you feel like the people there speaking in opposition against it and the work that was done with Clara had impact.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, and the Clara Impact Survey, they did a great job of putting that together, and you could tell there's a commonality. A lot of people that were speaking referenced that, so huge shout out to them too for organizing this and giving everybody information, data, stats to go off of, where we're not solely just making up arbitrary numbers, because that's not factual.
Right.
And like with that too, there was some discrepancies. They actually, one lady, she was up there quoting some stats and stuff, and corrected them, rightfully so. It was pulled that there's about 80,000 short-term rentals in the state of Colorado. Now, the data that we have via Clara and our marketing tools suggest it's about 21,000 or something similar to that. So there's
were they just web scraping and looking at any and all listings?
That's my guess.
And ones that were no longer available, or
like if it's listed on Airbnb and VRBO and counting that as two.
Yeah.
So I mean, but a 60,000 discrepancy is quite profound. And, so that was something, just, kind of alarming. It's like, oof, well, like clearly there's not enough data behind this to support what you guys are trying to do.
It seems a little backwards. Yeah. The policymakers don't have any data to back up what they're trying to pass. And the people in opposition to it are the ones bringing the impact survey in.
Yeah. Yep.
Interesting. Yeah. So, it seems kind of backwards.
Well, and, another thing too, like, just hearing everybody's stories, like I have my own, you have your own, like why you got into short-term rentals, the why, and hearing people's why was quite interesting. And, this could be a whole different topic, different podcast, but, like one lady, she was a widow, and it was her and her husband's plan where she could, have this rental, and that would stipend her income for the increased cost of living, because her Social Security wasn't, working for her, fixed income or, expenses that were going up year by year. And, this would have just flattened her. Like she's like, I don't know what I would do if this passed. And there's so many stories like that. That's just one that kind of sticks out, because it, got the eyes welled up a little bit, like hearing this woman talk. And, that was her why. And so many people, whether it was a family business, family run operation, there's a young lady from Colorado Springs, and, they have a triplex where it's her family's thing, and, it's their, like they come together and do it. It's like a business, and this would again just flatten their industry. So a lot of heartfelt stories, and people are passionate about it. And I think on the legislative level, that just gets overlooked sometimes. You see the bottom line, the numbers. I'm not saying every politician, every government person's money hungry, but I think sometimes when you run the government too much like a business, sometimes you lose sight of what the people really want and need.
Yeah. What was the kind of demographic of people there? Was it property management companies, individual owners, multiple rentals? What was kind of?
So there was, Hosty, we were one of two management companies there. Evolve had a representative there, talked with that gentleman for a little bit. And then, Clara had some representatives, Mile High Host, and then just a lot of private owners, like the, touching stories of, like, hey, this is our single operation, so on and so forth. Airbnb had some reps there. And of course your, lobbyist, which you expect. But
right.
So, I mean, it's a good turnout and honestly good connections. I'm in a text group with a bunch of the people that were up there, and then just, sharing information, talking, and just more or less sharing resources, which I think that's crucial, to stick together in this industry and make sure that we are, on a uniform consensus of how legislation should look around, the businesses that and investments that we have. And, that's, I think, an important thing to note too, like the representative people there. Because a lot of times when people hear short-term rentals, they think big corporations and, if they're going to have 3 houses, what about us? Like, and it's so just misconstrued that these are all wealthy people. No, these are hardworking people who are, trying to make ends meet in an economy that's, running hot. Cost of living is going up, and they're trying to stay in the middle class, where that's, a whole nother podcast too, but, kind of actively dissolving.
Right.
So I think that's, a very crucial point of who was there.
So primarily it was individual homeowners, like just individuals, not corporate entities, not big time investors, just individuals with 1-2 rentals.
For the most part. And for us representing Hosty, like not all of our homeowners can be there for 9 hours, which is why we were, I can be. And, that's something that I think is important too, because like there's so many people that couldn't be there that long. And, whether that was by design or not, I'm not going to speculate into that, but, being pushed back further and further, but like it's important to have a voice in these scenarios. And I mean, we haven't even got to the results of this yet, but, but yeah, I mean,
what were some of the addendums that they had proposed right? Cause they had changed those and kind of semi-announced those during this 6 to 9 hours you were at the Capitol.
So the biggest one was the impact survey, and that would have kind of like put everything else on standstill until that was done, from what I understood. And then there was the one where hotels and condos couldn't classify themselves as short-term rentals anymore, which, that's, getting into semantics about tax law, right?
Yeah.
So that one was in there. And then there was one, the impact was the biggest one because that kind of put everything on ice. And that was the focal point. Whereas like, it was said a couple times like, well, this doesn't matter now because the impact survey, but, case in point, as I was saying earlier, the impact survey would give substance to do these things that you want to do on a biased measure.
Yeah.
And that was, a commonality that a lot of people called out in their testimonies, saying like, where's the funding coming from? Who's in charge of this? And any, unbiased thing, you need multiple safeguards to make sure that it indeed stays that way. So that was the biggest one. And
they hadn't even outlined a clear plan of what they were going to do with these taxpayer money yet.
Well, it was cloaked to education, and then that's where they tried to weave in the emergency services too, that it would go to that to fill this void, this discrepancy in certain communities that, they may truthfully have an issue, but it's not a statewide thing. So, that's where they're saying the money would go to. And that's where the fairness talk went in, where it's like, if STRs are truly, causing a strain on these services, they should pay more in taxes to, keep these services running, which, okay, there's a conversation we had there. Sure. But let's have some substance behind it, where nothing presented really substantiated that. It was scanty at best. And then you look into and dig into the local economies, with the permit fees, the lodging taxes, the sales taxes, like, where's that money going right now? Like, and my guess is the, municipalities, counties that are running it well and, really embracing the economical impact that in a positive way that short-term rentals can have, they are doing that in a, proper manner. And, I'd have some questions for the ones that say that that isn't the case.
Yeah.
And, I'm not.
Yeah, because the Clara impact survey clearly outlines the positive impact that it has on Colorado as a whole. So
yeah, I dug into that in my 2 minutes, and then got into my personal story a little bit too of my why, which we got into last episode. But I think it was definitely an experience for me, and a civics lesson nonetheless of how things work. Because if the results of this bill, the next step would be the House Senate Finance Committee. So they'd still have one more branch to get through. And fun fact about the legislative session, I believe it's each state, but Colorado specifically, it runs through April, and I think a couple of days into May. But like when this was going, they had 22 days to get it through the legislative session. Otherwise, it got put on ice till next year. Right. So again, like I have a cynical brain. I wonder if that was by design too, because we were talking about this thing. Our last episode was in
2 months ago in February, I think. Yeah.
And then this just dropped on like a Thursday or a Friday that you'd be in front of the Senate Finance Committee on the following Tuesday. Yeah. So it's kind of, and then the amendments drop less than 24 hours before. So again, my cynical brain goes, is that by design? Who knows? I'm not a politician. I'm not a government official, so I can only speculate.
Yeah. Well, for those listening that are waiting to hear the actual results, so
on the edge of their seats.
Yeah. So at the end of the testimonies, what was the final outcome?
Yeah. So first, and mind you, this vote didn't happen until 11 p.m. And there's a handful of people still sticking through. And I spoke. I could have left, but I'm like, there's a woman here. She's in her 80s. She's sticking this out. I can do that. And so I did. And the first vote was, on the amendments. So that would have been the one that would have just not killed this. It just prolonged it. So like if that got passed, it would have, to the next season, the next chapter, follow this thing. And in the big point with the amendment, as I mentioned, the biggest thing was that impact survey. And it got voted down. And that's when I was like, oh man, again, it was closer there. It was, I want to say, because there's 7 members. And I think it was like 4-3 or something like that. It was closer. I don't remember the exact vote count. Because just adrenaline at that point. I'm like, yes, let's go. And, then they voted on the, bill in its original context, which, that same, 400% property increase, all the things that we dissected in the last episode. So it's just that, no amendments, nothing. And that got voted down 6-1. So it was, the best possible outcome. Like It stopped it in its tracks there. And it made me feel like it was worth it to actually, have a voice in the matter, to actually, stay there for 9 hours.
Right.
And because a lot of times, like when you're faced with that, like for me, like I just, you often hear, what's the point? Why would I do that? Whatever I say, it doesn't matter anyway. Whereas like this felt the opposite. No, I'm not saying that's my opinion. I just hear that when I talk to people about voting or getting involved in your local politics. And this did show the power of unity and having a voice where, like if you don't, how are they going to know? Nothing's being said, nothing's being presented. And you might think somebody else is going to do that. Well, no, not all the time. You gotta, band together and, have a voice and say in the matter and make sure it's factually bound, right? Like you just can't go up there and blabber nonsense. Do your research. And like I said, it was very rewarding at the end. And then just seeing people's faces light up when
everyone started cheering and clapping. And
they did to an extent, but told keep it down.
Yeah.
And I commend the Senate Finance Committee members for sticking it out. I know they didn't want to be there. Like I said, my cynical brain's like, they're pushing this back. But also, these are people with families, jobs. They probably have to get up early the next day. And they were there till after 11 o'clock. So might sound like I'm dogging on them with some of those comments. But I commend them for sticking through that. I know that's not fun for them to do either.
Yeah.
But yeah, just seeing people's faces light up when they realize their livelihood, their business, their investments, it's safe for now.
They killed the bill, voted it down, and didn't I hear, was it Senator Hansen kind of stormed out?
He didn't have the, happiest look on his face. I get it to a point, that's a lot of work to sponsor a bill and put all this through. I can't even begin to imagine, I've never done that. But, it's also, this is a clear opposition, and there's a lot of opposition, and there's a lot of factual points. So it's like, come with something that, the people are going to want. Like, clearly this wasn't it.
Yeah.
So it's like, that's politics, right? But, didn't seem the happiest, which, that's how this works.
Yeah. So great news, obviously, for us and the people in opposition of the bill. Bad, I guess not really bad news, but the was it HB 1299 bill is another bill similar to this one, which is, can you explain that one a little bit more?
That one was in different sponsors, everything. I mean, the key,
and this one just kind of popped up recently, right?
It did. I mean, like, I think it came actually introduced in February. It just got a lot less of attention because SB33 was so much more robust in its, what it would encompass for your local investors and our state entirely. So I think that one just got all the attention, where this one's just waiting in the whims there.
Yeah.
And, it truthfully, it does feel like it just kind of snuck up there. It was set to, well, and I guess I'll back up. It had the same kind of tax ordinance where it would bump up short-term rentals to a true commercial rate, which would, be that 400% increase. The key factor here, or the biggest difference, is it more or less went after, homeowners that had more than one rental. So if you had two rentals and it wasn't a secondary home, then that would apply to you. Which, to me, tomato, it's the same girl, different dress.
Yeah.
And, it's a give an inch, it takes a mile. And that's where, this bill could have been equally as dangerous. And I say could have been because it was set to be in front of the House Finance Committee yesterday. And the latest information I got on the matter from a lobbyist that's been involved is that it's been suspended indefinitely. So that's great news for now. Now I'm waiting because apparently there are some conversations with the House Finance Committee on the matter yesterday, closed to the public, from what I understand. So I don't know if anything came from that, but last I was communicated via email from some of the members of Clara from what they got from the lobby. So a lot of trickle down stuff, right? Is that it's been suspended indefinitely. And, it's important to notate, and we were talking before the podcast, these things got shut down. But, pay attention. They're going to come in different forms. They're going to come in different packages. And sometimes, it might take a year or two and then, resurface. And the engagement, the knowledge, nobody that I know, unless you get paid for it, likes to talk politics or dig into tax bills. Right. But, that's where it matters. Your local politics really do. I mean, more so than a presidential election, frankly, because, that's what you see, when you walk out your door. That's what you see when you look at your bank account. So just staying in tune and engaged is so crucial.
Yeah, absolutely. And big shout out to Clara Advocacy Group for, really just bringing all this together, the impact survey, communicating to all of us what's actually going on. I don't know how much of this I actually would have been able to keep up with if it wasn't for them.
Absolutely.
And also thank you to you for going and spending all that time there.
Well, I was happy to do it. And, it's like I said, it's important to have a voice. And I've always been the mindset where it's if I'm going to complain about something, I'm going to try my damnedest to do something about it. And that's what this felt like. And, I'm fortunate to, work for a company that paid me to camp out at the Capitol for 9 hours with a salary.
I wish I could have been there that day.
But I mean, and that's the thing. Like I said, I get it. It's hard, but it's my job. It's our job as a company to advocate for our homeowners and stay in the loop of what's going on. For their investments and frankly for our company's livelihood too.
Right.
So
yeah, absolutely.